Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Board of Selectmen's meeting of May 8th, 2018. Roll call, please.
4 selectmen present this evening. Mary is on vacation, as well as the town administrator and town council.
Okay. Kat, how would you like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
No, I want to have you do the Pledge of Allegiance.
Announcements.
Okay, announcements. Mr. Tony.
None.
Mr. T.
No, I'll hold off. No, I'll hold off until we get, well, actually, I do. The continued hearing for the Woodland Cove 40B project is tomorrow night in this room at 6:30. If you're concerned about this project, I would suggest showing up and making sure your voice is heard by the Zoning Board of Appeals.
Thank you. Patrick?
We have no announcements, believe it or not, tonight.
Oh,
Not a one. Strange.
yeah, it is.
No folder?
No folder.
No, no folder. Apparently there was none.
Okay, nothing for me, which is unusual. Tony, anything going on just for the public's information?
No.
Yeah, I'll put this out there now. The Affordable Housing Trust met this morning. It's a 5-member board. I think for about 4 years. We've only had 3 members. We have no pending applications for the funds to use towards affordable housing. We haven't had any pending since about 2 years ago. It wasn't on the agenda for a vote, but the consensus of the 3 members was that perhaps we should go to fall town meeting with an article to roll this committee up, take the money and put it into the community preservation affordable housing fund, because it doesn't really seem to be any point in continuing to meet. We did produce an affordable housing plan back in 2013, which is still good. So there's really not much there for the committee to do. So that's just something that at the next meeting, we will vote to send a letter to the Board of Selectmen asking for a warrant article to rescind the prior warrant article that authorized the Affordable Housing Trust, continue the one commitment of funds that we do have to the Latham Clinic project on Great Neck Road, and to take the remaining funds and put them into the community preservation funds.
We just had today, there was an announcement for a community compact, a new initiative, and it lists a bunch of different pieces to qualify for a new grant program. And in that listing, there's Affordable Housing Trust as one of the requirements. Just to give you a heads up. Just came today.
Why don't you forward the program so we can review that? Awesome.
You're welcome. Patrick.
There it is, right there. All right, yeah, no, I don't need anything right now, thanks. Well, I'm good.
One piece we have, I'm sure nobody remembers, it's about a year plus, maybe a year and a half. We signed up for an aggregation electrical program for electrical rates. We missed the first round because we had to go through town meeting, which didn't fall time-wise well. They are still trying to get us into the original group through SERPED of the 23 communities that signed up. When I was in Boston today, I sat down with John O'Rourke, who's heading that up for us, and we still are on hold. It's extremely discouraging because we should have been in this several months ago, but myself and Mr. Sullivan keep trying on this. Just to, anybody who's been asking about it, that's what's happening with that right now. And that's all I've got.
Okay, citizens' comments.
Any citizens? I told you yesterday.
Anybody here to speak to the board tonight?
Wow.
Mr. Jimson? Come on down, grab a microphone.
Thought we got away with it.
Don Jepson, Precinct 3. I looked into, last week I was here and I talked about the possibility of switching the town election with the vote for the town election with the town meeting, okay? Because I said that's what Churro did. and then they were able to expedite trying to do overrides or, what'd you say, debt exclusions. And I dropped off a package with Alan, and then Claire Smith got back to me and said it does require a change in the charter to do that. But in the meantime, I had looked at the bylaws, and I'm a little confused because what it says under Article 1, Section 1 is the spring town meeting shall be construed to be the annual town meeting and shall be held on the first Tuesday of April of each year, and polls should be open by 8 o'clock and close no later than 12 o'clock. Is that correct? Or
I can answer that. Town meeting actually does begin on Election Day, but the only question to be decided that day is Article 1, which is actually the election itself. So town meeting commences at 8 a.m. on Election Day. At 8 p.m., it is, without a vote of anyone, it's technically adjourned until we come back on the fourth Monday of the month to take up the town business.
Okay,
So that's the explanation for that.
okay,
And that dates back to probably colonial times.
okay, well, it threw,
because the town officers were elected at town meeting.
Correct.
Yeah.
yeah, and it threw me for a loop because Truro was doing the opposite, and then I read that and I got confused. But anyway, Alan answered the question. It does require a charter change if we wanted to flip the election with the town meeting, and that's up to you if you want to take that. I'm not about to get into that, you know. But one of the other things that came up, just as an update, you know, I talked here about marijuana and pot shops and thinking that the money should go to certain charities rather than into the town. But just as an update on the news tonight, they said that Sharon is doing the same thing that Freetown did and a number of other towns have done. They voted for marijuana, now they're going to the polls tonight to vote against it. And right now, the total is 191 of the 295 cities in the town, cities and towns in Massachusetts have elected not to have pot shops.
There's actually 351, yeah.
Was it 351? Well, I'm quoting what the news said, they had 295.
They just
Maybe that
cut a
was
few out.
towns, not
They
cities.
cut a few out they didn't need.
Just to come back a little bit to what I had mentioned last week, and I mentioned Truro, one of the things that they did that I thought was maybe something you would want to consider for here, because I thought, especially now, you know, with Judith Whiteside was on the board, and we also have Mary Bruce on the board now as her replacement, is one of the things that they do in their, let's see if I can find the article. It says, at the end of that article, which I had sent to you, that the subject was, and it was buried in it, what the selectmen were doing, said year-round condo issue resurfaces. If you read to the end of it, one of the things that that article concluded, it said, the selectmen also proposed, this is in Truro, the selectmen also proposed to change the name to Select Board to be more inclusive of all agendas. And I don't know whether that's something you'd be interested in doing instead of being selectmen, because I always have trouble when I put it into, and it comes back as selectmen's, and then with an explanation, and then it doesn't say that it's an accepted term, but I'm sure it is, but.
It's historically the correct way to do it by the state of Massachusetts.
Excuse me?
It's historically correct by the state of Massachusetts.
Okay, but this isn't the only town, Truro is not the only one that's done that too.
We asked about it before, and neither Mrs. Whiteside nor...
Okay, I'll let you explain that to Mary Bruce then.
No, Mrs. Bruce, we asked, and she said no.
No, she's happy to be
You must
referred
not
to as
live
selectmen as
in a house
opposed
with a
to...
woman who is in for women's rights, Alan.
It
That's a
doesn't-
joke, Alan, that's a joke.
I'm just letting you know, it
Yeah.
doesn't matter.
Anyway, moving on, it was just something that was at the end of that, and I don't know if anybody had read that far, because it was a little more extensive. And Alan, you just answered the last one that I was going to bring up, which was on electric aggregation, which I had done a follow-up email to Peter Teitelbaum on, and you answered that, so I won't spend any time on that, and thank you for your time.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks, Don.
Okay.
Anybody else? Okay, appointments. We have one appointment, Kevin Costa.
Come on up, Kevin.
Come on, Kevin. Yep. Come on down.
The reason we're doing this one, this has been held quite a while because we had the Community Events Committee, had a recreation member, which basically, actually a CETA member. And the CETA board, of course, was dissolved, and now it's the Redevelopment Authority. So we converted that particular member to an at-large. We passed it at town meeting, therefore we were able to go ahead and take care of that now.
Yeah, I was at the town meeting.
So you want to be on community events?
I would like to be, yes.
Okay, good. Do you want to tell us anything before we decide?
We've had a home here for decades, which was a second home. I've always been active in my town that I've lived in for the past 30 years, Fairhaven. Experience on the Finance Committee, was a town meeting member for 30 years. And now that we live here full-time, I like to give back. I like to volunteer. I just like to be part of the community in any way, shape, or form, anywhere I can help.
Write his name down.
So, that's why I'm here.
We got to put that name down.
So any way I can help, that's why.
We'll get you. Well, thank you.
Information for the board. CEC, Kevin has been to several of our meetings, and the board did vote to go ahead and approve them.
Great.
Okay, so I move that we approve Kevin A. Coster of 156 Pinehurst Drive, Wareham, to the Community Events Committee for a term to expire no later than June 30th, 2021.
Second.
Motion by Patrick, second by Peter. Any questions from the board? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? 400. Thank you.
Very much.
You should be, your paperwork tomorrow
Appreciate
up at the Selectmen's office, get
Okay.
signed in.
Thanks for stepping up.
I think,
Get taken ethics test, too.
At the clerk's office, yeah.
All good fun.
okay, thank you.
Thanks.
You can't fail that test, by the way.
Yeah.
I know.
Okay.
You actually literally can't fail the test if you put a wrong answer and it keeps prompting you to go back, don't pick A, pick B. Yeah, you literally can't flunk the test.
You can have fun and try and
It
fail.
tests zero knowledge.
I know. It's interesting. Take care, Kevin.
All right, so now we have an application for Wareham Management Group LLC, DBA Dunkin' Donuts, for 3 common vics, one at 419 Main Street, one at 3052 Cranberry Highway, and one at 2360 Cranberry Highway. I move that we approve all 3.
Second.
You want to tell them why?
No.
Okay.
Like, why don't you both come up? I have a couple of things to discuss.
Do you?
Yes, Mr.
Oh.
Bowen's going to love me as usual.
Oh, boy.
What, another ambush at a meeting?
No. I've been over to see Mr. Pimentel before. He does a very good job with the properties he owns, keeping them clean. The ones he doesn't own, he has very little control over. Unfortunately, this past Sunday, I basically by myself went, because I just didn't want to bother anybody, walked between the minor school and Depot Crossing, both sides of the road. The number of Dunkin' Donuts, plastic cups, etc., was probably, if you want to have numbers, probably 200 to about 5 for everybody else total. The only thing that beat you guys was Nips, and they were about twice as many. It's a problem all over town. It's not just yours, but in general. I can't sit there, and I've already asked our town council what I can do by adding a fee, because Patrick said he never saw a fee I didn't like, for trash pickup, et cetera. But I'm asking now, before I continue to try and go farther into this at the state level, if there's any way at all, your particular company would consider having their employees, volunteer to help us clean trash, maybe once a month for an area where your stores are. Because if you do go and look, and I hate to pick on you, but unfortunately, you're the most visible one out there.
Understood.
We already volunteer down in Shangri-La to do that in community events. I'm very involved in that, so if we can take it further, I'd be more than happy to
We
as
would
well.
appreciate it, because like I say, I'm not exaggerating when I say, when I went both sides, I got 4 of the big 50-gallon black bags, and I'm gonna say probably a quarter of those black bags with Dunkin' Donuts products. So I would appreciate whatever help you can give us.
Let me see what we can do. We certainly appreciate the patronage. It sounds like we're a big hit here in Wareham.
You are a big hit.
You are a big hit.
I think you're a big hit everywhere.
Well, I'm sure some of that is people throw it in the pickup trucks, they happen to drive down the road, which is 40 miles an hour, blows off the back, and it probably doesn't come from you at all. But I can pick on you today.
You certainly can. And we can bring this back and certainly see what we can do to make
Just
that
let
happen.
us know what you can do and can't do.
Absolutely.
I appreciate it. Go ahead, Pat.
All right, so I made a motion to approve
Tony seconded.
Seconded.
Okay, motion by Patrick, second by Tony. Anybody else, any questions? None heard, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed,
Thank
abstained?
you.
All set.
Thank you all
Thanks.
so much.
Say a little pin the telephone, me, please.
Take care.
Okay, next up, Onset Bay, we'll put this one for later. No.
Wow.
What was the look did I get the look? I couldn't see you because there was... Yeah, you got it. Because there was somebody in my way, but okay. All right, we'll do yours now.
You're gonna
All
get me
right,
in
this
trouble.
is a request from Onset Bay Association for the use of town property for the onset fireworks to be held Saturday, July 7, 2018, with a rain date of July 8th, from 9 p.m. to 11 p.m., and the use of the band shell from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m.
Second.
All right.
Any questions from the board?
Maybe, we'd like an update on your fundraising, yes.
All right. Well, Kat Jones, Executive Director of the Onset Bay Association and Chairwoman of the Fireworks Committee. To date, we have submitted a deposit of $9,750 to Pyrotechnico. They're the pyrotechnics company we went with for the first time last year. We've contracted them once again. We can't get that money back, so we have to make it happen.
That's right.
There you go.
It is a non-refundable deposit. Our goal, as always, is $40,000. Just to break it down for those that don't know, the cost of the pyrotechnics display itself is $19,500. The police fee for the day is approximately $11,000. We hired an incredible cleanup crew last year that really did wonders for the village. We hired them to come during the show till 11 p.m., and then they returned at 5 a.m. the next day. Town was spotless by 5 a.m. That was about $2,000, so we'll probably hire them again. There's a lot of, behind-the-scenes costs as well. We'll get some T-shirts to sell as a fundraiser, permitting, and all that other good stuff, with a total of about $40,000. So we are about $10,000 away from our goal. And I feel confident that we'll reach that, with the community's help, of course.
Good news.
Yes, very good news, thank you.
Any double XL t-shirts?
I'll make sure it happens.
Double?
Yeah.
Double?
For a friend, right?
Yeah, asking for a friend.
I'll see to it personally.
Actually known as Fat Boy
boy.
T-shirts.
No, good.
What's that?
Fat Boy T-shirts.
Yeah.
Getting better every time.
All right, we have, thank you.
Thank you, all set?
All set there.
Thank you.
You're all set.
Yeah,
Thank you for everything you do.
Thank you. All right, renewal of 2 secondhand
Just an XL
dealer
for me, thank you.
licenses.
Yeah, right.
One for Aaron J. Marks, Inc., DBA AJ Marks Jewelers, 3203 Cranberry Highway, East Wareham, and one Not Your Average Antiques, 3086 Cranberry Highway, East Wareham, Mass.
Yes, second.
And these,
Motion by Patrick, second by Peter. Any questions from the board? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, 300. Tony's temporarily out of the room.
that's okay. Discussion, okay, discussion of possibly transferring management control of Tremont Nail Factory to the Wareham Redevelopment Authority.
Go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, back in 2004, both the article and the motion that passed in town meeting essentially put the selectmen in charge of the property itself, which is kind of unusual because under our charter, usually the town administrator is in charge of quote-unquote facilities. But in this instance, they put the selectmen in charge of the whole kit and caboodle. They did give an opt-out for the selectmen, who could then delegate the responsibility for management of the property to the Wareham Economic and Community Development Corporation. The Wareham Redevelopment Authority, of course, is the successor in interest to the CEDA Community and Economic Development Agency, which was the successor in interest to the Economic Development Industrial Corporation. The thought here was that the Redevelopment Authority is well situated to manage the property. This area is included in the current slum and blight study that was done in Wareham Village, which is going to be one of the bases for deciding what goes into the redevelopment plan that will be presented to a future town meeting. The Tremont Nail will be included in that. The Board of Selectmen actually votes what goes into the redevelopment plan, and then town meeting adopts regulations which authorize the Board of Selectmen to take certain actions, or the redevelopment authority, as the case may be. And so this is simply to get this, sort of off our plates as selectmen and into the redevelopment authority, where we can start working on getting more events out there, seeing if people are interested in using the space that we have, and so on and so forth. So, any questions? Or?
Yeah, I have a question. I have a couple questions. One, I want to ask Rich a couple questions, if you don't mind. Rich, it's held for historical purposes, okay? When they made the motion, it says for historical purposes. Now, that's obviously going to affect what the property can be used for and how it's used. How does that affect us transferring it to them for use? And the other thing that I want to know is, it might as well have the same thing. The other thing is, there's 2 selectmen that sit on that committee. So it's sort of selectmen anyway. Even though there's not a third vote there, it's...
Well, it's not a subcommittee because we created it as an entirely separate body politic.
Yeah,
It's-
I
and
understand that,
We're actually waiting for the state to come back with the papers of incorporation.
With your permission, Mr. Chairman. Obviously you couldn't turn it into a facility that had no historic attributes to it. So starting at that extreme, if you use the property in a way that it generates income that either directly or indirectly results in the facility's maintenance, because you do have to spend money on it, it's legitimate to use it for a variety of purposes. It's like, for example, in Boston, any of the historic sites, if you want to rent out, well, I don't know about the old State House, but I know there are various other historic sites that you can actually rent them out and use them, and the income that's generated is used to help maintain them. Now, in this case, I know we don't have a direct revolving fund, but...
Actually, we do now.
Oh, do we? Yeah, well, that's right, we do. So I stand corrected. So that makes it even a little bit stronger. So, in terms of using it for events and things of that sort, I don't see an issue. I mean, if we turned it into a gas station or something like that, well, of course, that would be an issue. On the business of having a couple selectmen on it, the special act allows that. So there wouldn't be any conflict of interest because it's statutorily allowed. And in any event, the interest of the 2 selectmen who serve on it would be considered to be a public interest. It's not as if they were private individuals who were managing it for their own benefit. So because of the statute and because of the nature of their interest in the property, which is public spirited, I don't see a conflict issue there.
Okay. And Eric, if I can, you think this is the best way to go about this? Because we're transferring, right now, we have control over it. If something comes up, it has to come in front of us.
Right.
We deal with it, whatever it is. This year, we would lose that ability. We would be handing it over to somebody else.
Right.
Once upon a time, we used to do that. We used to hand all the stuff off to EDIC.
Right. And part of the original was it was handing over CETA, and basically the Board of Selectmen took over for CETA, and now it's going back to the successor for CETA. So it's kind of closing the loop. From me, I'm one of the people on the committee, and I think it's probably a great forum to help it out, to help out. And when I say it, I mean the location.
I forgot you were on the committee.
Yeah. So if you want an unbiased opinion, I just gave it to you.
There you go. Yeah, exactly.
I forgot.
Yeah, unstatutory. Rich said it's unbiased.
All right,
And now you
well-
know who to complain to, too.
Yes.
That guy.
Just for some background information, I believe the selectman, Mary Jane Pillsbury, back at that time, they had pushed to have, to buy the property, et cetera, and to develop it. So they set up a Tremont Nail Master Plan Committee, who they turned it over to, actually. In that particular committee, I was chair for quite a while. We weren't able to get it developed and off the ground, and I believe we had Chris Riley was the last CETA director who was working on it as well. And what happened was we basically turned the property over to CETA because we dissolved the Master Plan Committee. So this is just a natural progression of what happened. So the board had actually, way back, actually transferred it over. Go ahead, Rich.
Yeah, there's also the...
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I'm about to touch on what Selectman Tropiano mentioned, that there is a de facto preservation restriction on the property because CPA money was used. And no matter what use it ended up in 5 years or 50 years, the property will have to be used in a manner that's consistent with the restriction that's in place.
Okay, just want to
Yeah, and
touch bases a
And
little
just so
bit.
people understand, that restriction certainly means that, we can't take a wrecking ball to the buildings out there, the historic buildings, and replace them with modern construction, brand-new buildings or anything like that. The whole purpose of buying the property, CPC funds, was to preserve the history. The flip side is, though, that having a physical plant the size of that with 7 buildings, 6 of which are very old.
If I remember correct, there was a 4-to-1 vote to buy that building,
Oh, it was huge.
and 4-to-1 from the selectmen.
Yeah. Who's
I
the
was
one?
the one.
Yeah. Well, there was just, to add to that, there was a 6-to-1 vote on Community Preservation Committee to recommend to the selectmen that in town meeting that it be bought. The one vote against was my late mother, because she happened to talk to the environmental attorney, who's her son, who said, no way do you buy an old metal foundry, you're going to find problems. So,
Which we did, and which we're
which we
gonna
have,
to
and
mitigate.
we're in the process of coming up with a plan to mitigate at this point. But it's kind of funny, you and I sit here today, knowing what was going through our
I know
minds.
what your mother said.
Yeah, 14 years ago.
I was here, I remember your mom, don't worry.
Yeah, so it's kind of funny that I've kind of become a booster of the place. Hey, if we're stuck with it, we might as well try to make
I
it
feel
work.
like I'm really old because I know all this stuff.
You are, that's okay.
All right, so I make a motion, then we approve the transfer of Tremont Nail Factory property to the Wareham Redevelopment Authority.
Second.
Motion by Patrick, second by Tony. Other questions? None heard, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained, 400. Any
Okay.
other business, 48 hours? Tony?
Nope.
Peter?
Nope.
Patrick?
Nope.
Alan? Nope. Town administrators report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have some news for tonight about one of our department heads. Chief Walsh has informed us that he is retiring from the Wareham Police Department. Having reached his maximum retirement benefits, he has made a family decision to retire, and we wish him well and thank him for his over 33 years of service to the community as a whole.
Okay.
Just wanted to let everyone know that. As such, I've named John Walsek, Lieutenant John Walsek, as the acting chief, and that's pending the ratification of the Board of Selectmen at next week's meeting. Because we have a retirement, we need to have an acting chief.
Yeah, he's the senior lieutenant, he has to be acting chief anyway.
Yep.
So we don't, it's not like we have to do it.
Yeah, I won't be at the meeting next week, but I would certainly endorse the board to vote favorably upon this
Absolutely.
appointment.
Sure.
I think it makes all the sense in the world.
Yep, makes all the sense, yep.
We'll take care of that.
All right. As part of that, I don't know if you remember, Lieutenant Walsek was the emergency management director. As such, and given the many duties that they have as a police lieutenant, we've spoken about it, and we've named Patrick McDonald, the health inspector, as the emergency management director. And part of that, if you know his background from the Mass Maritime, it's a great choice. He's been very active in this, attending the meetings and directing. And I think Mr. Jepson once commented to me, those that work hard in the town get rewarded by more duties, so that's
how it works.
It's congratulations
Exactly right. That's
to
how it
Mr.
works.
McDonald, so. He's been a great asset to us already, and he's fighting to go for grants, and it's part of what we've already put forward with the 50,000 that we requested at town meeting, so.
Okay, good. Anything else?
Well, that's all the news fit to print tonight.
Okay. Liaison initiative reports, anyone?
Yep.
Tony?
I don't have anything tonight. I'm beat.
You do?
Yeah, I have one thing. I didn't attend the whole thing, but last week I went to the Municipal Vulnerability Program presentation that was put on by the Planning Department, Director Buckland, and also the Woods Hole Group, which is a private consulting group. It was very interesting. We broke up into groups and basically identified areas where the town was vulnerable pretty much to weather events. And it was somewhat competitive. Of course, each group was trying to get their ideas to get voted on. Basically, what you had to do was you had to pick 5 categories that you thought were the most important. You figured them out, you listed them, they got taped up on a wall, and then we ran around with little sticky dots. You had 5 sticky dots to put up on the ones you thought were most popular. And I must have jumped in with the ringers because all 5 of our ideas came out in the top 5. That doesn't mean that others weren't part of that as well, because there was some cross-pollination, if you will, amongst the ideas of what was most important. The thing that came out was it might be a good idea to move our incident command center from the Wareham Fire Station on Main Street, which is certainly subject to storm flowage, to come up with a new home for that. And the other thing was, I'm trying to remember what the other one was. But anyway, I think the current thinking is possibly to move that into the multi-service center because that is out of the way. We've got a big parking lot here where the fire district can mobilize their vehicles and get them out of harm's way down on Main Street. And apparently there's something like $400,000 for each community that participates up to $400,000 in grant money available to help you achieve these goals that you've identified. So it was a really interesting presentation. You look at the maps, and it's frankly scary what would happen to this town with a 100-year flood or a Category 3 hurricane. You're going to have literally thousands of properties underwater. You're going to have thousands of residents who need shelter, food, water, clothing. It's pretty daunting. And the first step, of course, is to be able to make sure that you can respond to these, or at least have communications so that you can begin any, hopefully you don't have to do life-saving operations. Hopefully people are smart enough to get out of the storm's way. But so that you can begin getting people to where they have shelter, protect them and whatnot. So it was a really interesting program, and I'd like to thank Director Buckland for getting this going. It's fascinating.
Yeah, ironically, if you see that the hurricane's coming slightly to the west of us, even worse than if it was a dead-on hit.
Yeah. If it goes up Narragansett Bay, we get crushed.
Yes.
What's a sin is that there used to be a thing, I don't know if anybody remembers it, but there used to be a thing called civil defense. And the civil defense used to handle a lot of this kind of stuff. They'd have, vehicles that they were given by the federal government and everything else to help with all this stuff. And all they did was really shift it all to us to do. And at least there was funding for it. I mean, there was a lot of good stuff that happened. I remember during the storm of '78 working in Waltham for the civil defense and out on the highway 128 and pulling cars off of there and stuff as part of civil defense with a deuce-and-a-half Army truck and so on and so forth. And it was terrific stuff, and it was all volunteers, so there wasn't that much, cost. It's too bad that's all gone away. It really is.
Yeah,
Ever since when they did away with the shelters, that's when they did away with civil defense.
They have been looking, some of our folks have been looking at some of the high groundwater vehicles, and they're pretty, they're military looking because it's military surplus.
Yeah.
There's the potential for us getting 1 to 2 of those that they've been really working with, and it's not just our folks, it's working with the fire departments and such that have really been bringing it forward. And my idea is, well, not my idea, my thing is, if they can get them, let's bring them, because there's going to be the time that we do need those.
If you get the deuce-and-a-halfs, have the snorkels on them.
Yep.
So you can drive through with water in the cab. I mean, literally drive right through without any problems.
I can get you luck.
And just for an idea of what happens in a strong hurricane here, after the aftermath of Hurricane Carol, after the wind subsided, there was still a bunch of water on Main Street. My grandfather rode my grandmother up and down Main Street. So that kind of gives you an idea of how deep it gets. I think the high water mark on the Cornwells building is about 9 feet up off the sidewalk or something like that.
Still there.
Yeah. So this is serious stuff. That all goes underwater, so at the very minimum, setting up a command center that isn't flooded out
And you know, the funny
4
part,
hours after the storm hits is important.
the funny part is most of us, most people, not myself, but most, don't know what it's like or what it's all about. I mean, even the kids today, I mean, 91 was the last time we had a hurricane, and that was really nothing compared to Carol or the no-name storm, you know, that went before. So nobody really understands what it's all about, you know, they just don't. They're so far between that, you know, they don't get it, you know?
They will.
And it's scary because, you know, you find them running around outside or doing something, you know, doing silly stuff, you know? Just this last storm with the wind, people were out running around in it and everything else. They're lucky they didn't get killed by a tree, falling trees and stuff, you know?
Yeah, that was one of the biggest complaints by our first responders and such, was the people joyriding out and just didn't understand.
Thinking that's okay,
Yeah.
you know? Like, and they think there's no dangers. I had to drive through the mountain forest after the storm, just after the storm. And the minor forest trees were all leaning over like this, and some of them were root balls were hanging out and everything else. And I was afraid, driving down there, that one of those trees was gonna fall on my car as I drove through.
I think I went out after the third one, you know, when I'd heard that the roads were substantially clear, just to look around at the damage. And I get out to West Wareham and I see some of the damage out there, and then I look up and I realize I'm riding around in a convertible. This probably isn't the smartest thing to do.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't.
Mr. Chairman, I forgot to just ask real quick if I could respectfully request on the next agenda, we put the senior work-off program to vote that, to get that going.
Okay.
The other thing is how about that, when are we gonna have that executive session that we need to have? Because you know, this thing's going on too, and I'd like to discuss this 40B in executive session where we could have some strategy going on prior to the thing getting done, you know?
29th.
If that's okay.
I need someone to come in for minor also,
That's a good idea.
if you could. Okay, let me go over this, a few things I got so we can go home.
All right.
Actually, I went to the Bay Point event, which was the event Peter was talking about. I did the early part, Peter did the second part, because there's a bunch of places I had to go. We have an event, I believe it's the 29th of this month, in the auditorium. Actually, it's not going to be the auditorium, it's actually going to be here during our BOS meeting. As part of that program, to qualify, we actually have to come before the board, and we have to listen to a presentation, et cetera. It's going to be a long night, the 29th, because it's about a 3/4 of an hour presentation that we have to do in order to qualify, so everybody knows that. I think it's June 5th, if I haven't forgotten again, at the auditorium. I think it's 6 o'clock at night. FEMA is coming to give a presentation. The maps are in place again. We have them here as well. And they'll explain probably what the insurance rates are going to be. If everybody remembers, about 4 years ago, they scared everybody with the new rates. They're also going to be able to come and explain to you how you can save money, which kind of doesn't make sense, but that's what they claim. So it's important, if you're in a flood zone, VE especially, or if you're required to have flood insurance, it'd be a good idea to come and sit and listen and ask some questions. Also, on that Thursday last week, I went up to the State House for an event. The last two communities for the Community Compact, which we were one of the first ones to sign in, was basically Wilbraham, the home of Friendlies, and the city of Boston for the 350 and 351. So everybody in the state of Massachusetts now is in the Community Compact, which is a nice thing, except now we're competing against 350 other communities for the same grants now, so it makes it more difficult. We've done a really good job through our town administrator in his departments, and the people working in his departments getting grants. Our percentages of success compared to as little as 5 years ago, but the difference is tremendous. You know, we're constantly in the line for grants all the time, and we're getting stuff. So it's important that we keep working the way we are. I also went to Fort Rodman that same day at night for the annual South Coast bike path groups. Unfortunately, I was the only one there from Wareham. So I'd like to call the bike path people and to find out what's going on, because we have a path that's been approved for 2023 for funding. A couple things have just come up. The Mass DOT called me 2 days ago and said they have a piece of property which they're considering if the town wants or if a private citizen wants to take and use, and they're gonna basically give up the railroad bed that's not being used anymore. For at least 3 or 4 years before this, they said no. They weren't gonna give it up, so all of a sudden they changed their mind. So we're gonna see what happens there, make sure the town is okay with whatever the end result is.
What railroad facility?
There's a railroad bed that's been basically just, you know where the property is down by Bob Perry and the Beaton property there, I forget the name of the cranberry bogs in West Wareham.
Yeah, it goes through West Wareham.
Oh, you talk about the spur that runs down,
Yeah.
what's it called, Squirrel Island, that neck of the
All
woods?
down there.
They used to do the cranberries,
Yeah.
that was the
Yeah.
cranberry track.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
So
And that comes into the main track in West Wareham, right? Yeah.
that originally was.
Goes down there,
that
White's
ori-
Path down
Yeah.
that way, what's that other road over there? Goes down that way.
But that particular piece was originally where the bike path wanted to go. And they had to change the whole thing and go down County Road because, you know, the railroad decided they weren't gonna let anybody use it. So they've now changed their mind.
Back
So
and forth, huh?
it's back and forth as usual. So that's basically coming up on that as well.
There's no
Um,
track on it, you know, it's.
I know, but they
been
made a
gone for
decision.
years.
As I said today, I was at MMA this morning, basically all day. We have this new aging program that they've announced. If you give me a second. Bum, bum.
You know that, while you're doing that, you know there's holes along the track that are dug on the sides of the
Yep.
track? And where they used to fill with water, they used to get the water to run into these holes so they could put water on the cranberries as they went, you know, as they moved them down the track, they could get water from the cranberries.
Okay, so here's
Keep
what,
them wet.
here's what we have from the
Because they'd sit a long time, I guess, apparently, in the
Yeah.
drains.
State
They had these
House.
watering holes.
Here's what we have from the State House today. They're still running
It's kinda
about
strange.
$800 million above the benchmark for their revenue.
Mhm.
It's kind of holding. So they're looking to add another $12.5 million to the circuit breaker. It's a possibility. Charter schools, they want to add another $2.5 to $5 million for the cities and towns. There's a new program for police training to increase the existing training programs by 10 million. So we need to watch if that comes through. The House has basically voted their budget. The Senate should have their budget voted on by Thursday. Then they'll go back and forth and figure out what they're actually going to do at the end. General aid, they basically said they're going to grow by 3.5% for 2019 again. They're holding those numbers there. There's the Uber and Lyft rides that are out there. They're actually generating, I think it's 10 cents per ride that goes into a fund that should go to the towns, not to the general fund, but to the town directly. This particular money, they came up with some ridiculously high number for the number of Uber rides in the last year. So we need to look at that and see where that money is going. You know, because I'm not sure how we're getting it or if we even got it yet. The short-term rental bills, which is, you know, Airbnb, et cetera, the House and Senate basically got theirs all done. They will decide how they're going to, what the rate's gonna be. Will it be the same as a bed and breakfast tax, or whether it will be the same as a hotel? And the cities and towns, the Senate bill will allow the cities and towns to put their own regulations in, where the House bill, they have it the other way, which we have no control. So we're hoping that the Senate bill is the one that gets passed, and that's coming. It will require House inspections within 60 days, which we already do, more or less with our rental program that we have in the town. So we're kind of in place for that. And what else we got coming? There's this Joint Labor Management Committee that they've got to help with remediation, which would be Mr. Sullivan. I'm not sure how well that really works. And the House bill is 1 year for Chapter 90 funds at $200 million. The Senate bill is 3 years at $200 million a year for $600 million. So we're still short. Well, the $100 million is sitting from Paul Patrick's regime, not going anywhere. But the problem is, if you want to know what the real number is, it's about 600 million a year to catch up. So we're just every year we're just filing behind. And they still haven't finished voting on it, which means Mr. Menard can't go out and contract anything until the money's in place.
Yep.
I wish they would change the rules, where if we know what the money is, they would allow us to borrow on it or whatever ahead of time, or to spend it in advance. The Lieutenant Governor basically went over everything else, the same thing. They have some bond bills, which will be for local governmental workforce program. They want to jumpstart and move this forward. They're pushing a new trails and recreation program we need to look at to see if we qualify for that as well. I'll give Mr. Sullivan the information on that. New Undersecretary for DHCD, one of my favorite organizations. And I'm waiting to hear from Secretary Ash if they're going to recognize mobile homes as affordable. We're still waiting on that. And I haven't got an answer on that either. And this is the aging program that I mentioned to Peter, which includes Affordable Housing Trust and about 5 or 6 things. It's part of the community compact with new initiatives, basically for dementia and Alzheimer's citizens. And I think that's enough for the day on that one. And just let me check one more thing we can get out of here. Sorry.
While we're waiting, Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
we did, Plymouth County did get approved as a severe storm and flooding, a federal disaster area for the March 2nd to 3rd nor'easters, and which was going to kick in. They're allowing SBA loans. So the types of loans are business and physical disaster loans, economic injury disaster loans, and even home disaster loans, which are loans to homeowners or renters to repair or replace disaster-damaged real estate and personal property. That includes automobiles. So we will send this out via anybody that's registered with the town's email, send it out as a blast, and also put it on the website.
Last thing I have is I'll be going up to Boston again on Thursday, Department of Transportation, to testify in favor of the electronic sign on Robinson's GMC, which will be right on Route 25 highway, which will give us access for emergencies, for events, etc. They're willing to help us as well, so hopefully we'll get approval on Thursday on that. That's it for me. Consent agenda?
The last thing is we have no bills to pay because town council doesn't like to be paid, so. Approval minutes from August 29th.
He's adopted the Cohen School of Client Billing, I think.
Yeah, apparently.
Yeah, I'll make this motion because Patrick wasn't at the meeting. Move to accept the minutes of August 29th, 2017. Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained?
Yeah,
Patrick abstained.
301.
You got to sign.
And I can
301.
Move to adjourn.
sign. Motion by Peter, second by Tony. All those in favor?
Aye.
You gotta sign that.
We're all set. Good night, Wareham.
Good night.